Hi, this is Eugenia Mitchell, host of At Home with the Mitchells. Thanks for listening to the following podcast on Public House Media.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy, and you probably are too. I'm Teegan, and I'm here today with Lindsay, and we're here to talk nerdy to you about sidekicks, whether that be in comics, in TV shows, in video games, what have you. We're going to discuss the ins and outs of sidekicks and what makes a good sidekick. But before we get into all of that, Lindsay has a little something for our Geek on Fleek.
Yes, so we are on probably a week and a half now of quarantine because of COVID-19. We're still allowed to say it, right? Like, it's still not a bad thing to say. But to be fair, most of us are stuck at home, reading all about it on social media. You don't know whether or not the news is right or the president's right or whatever is going on is going on. But I wanted to talk specifically about something that I thought was interesting because there's a few memes out there that talk about being an extrovert versus an introvert and what the quarantine means for those people. And it's interesting because sometime at the end of last week, which was the end of last week was our first week of really like not being able to interact in the same way as we're used to. And I was feeling super down, low, heavy. One of my coworkers referred to me as being grumpy that day, and it was a grumpy end to the week for me. And I think I might be working a little better at it this week. And I don't know if it's because I'm not on social media as much, or if I'm not sharing the things people are seeing, or maybe people are just sharing better stuff this week. I have no idea. But I really thrive on interactions with other people. I'm that person who gets into the elevator with you and tries to strike up a conversation about something small, stupid, petty. But I thrive on those interactions with people. So we've kind of decided, most of us have a little bit of introvert and a bit of extrovert in ourselves at the same time. But it does seem to me that a lot of the time, people who are extroverted sometimes have a little bit of introvert in themselves too. And there's a couple articles I've read that were really interesting. One of them actually tried to define it so black and white as being, if you had an extra 2 hours of time, would you rather spend those 2 hours on a couch with a good book or with a group of people, like a big group of, like a crowd of people? And of course, I don't want to be with a crowd of people I don't know. I'd rather be on my couch with a book. But Teegan actually told me that one of the biggest things she's ever seen, the best things seen to describe that would be whether or not being in interaction with people energizes you or if it kind of exhausts you. Mm-hmm. And it energizes me for sure. But I think what you said, Teegan, was that it exhausts you.
Yeah, like pretty much like going out and hanging around people. Like even though like, I obviously, love those people and love being around them enough to go out and hang around them. Like at the end, it's like, okay, I've got to go home and now you've got to just recharge because I am so drained now. Mm-hmm. I'm just exhausted by it at the end of it. And if I had, my druthers, unless this was something really important or something I was really, really looking forward to, I'd really rather just stay at home. Like, it's kind of funny how little my schedule has actually changed. As of this recording, there's no stay-at-home order in my county, but there is in Mecklenburg County, which is around Charlotte. Okay. And I was just reading the announcement and the directions and everything, just because I was curious. And as I was reading them, they were like, well, obviously, you stay at home. You can go out to get groceries, to get any essential household things that you need, like toilet paper, if that can be found. You can go to pharmacies to pick up medicine. You can go to a doctor if your doctor can't do your appointment over a telemed kind of thing. and obviously if you are deemed an essential employee, like, you work at a hospital, you work in a food industry, you work in a grocery store, then obviously you can leave for work, but otherwise stay at home. And I was reading through all of that, and I'm like, that has literally been my life for the past, like, several years. Like, I don't go out except in those circumstances. I don't really just go and hang out with people or go to places just to go to them. Like, I'm already, like, fulfilling a stay-at-home order just by living my normal life. Like, really, the biggest change has been my son isn't going to school, obviously.
Right.
But that's it. That's the only change.
Well, and it's interesting to me reading things that are like suggestions for extroverts in a quarantine. Now, I'm in Wisconsin. Our governor gave us a stay-at-home recommendation. Essentially, essential businesses, essential workers are still working, but a lot of those places have gone to work from home. There's an extraordinary amount of layoffs, and restaurant workers, people who work on tips, and in the food industry are really struggling this past week and a half, and it's been really, just rough for someone who would consider themselves an extrovert, especially because now my socializing really is cut to social media. So I find myself scrolling through it, just trying to figure things out. But it's funny, like the guides that you can find online, like I'm looking at the Federalist right now, and it says that you should video chat. Well, I don't want anybody to see what I look like when I'm at home. I look like a darn mess. So that's not going to happen. Play online games. Oh yeah. So I can completely not sleep all night and be playing an online game for 6 or 7 hours. Use Netflix Party to watch shows with friends. That's a cool idea. I think I've sort of kind of done that with a friend of mine or two, where we are playing, making sure we're watching it at exactly the same time so we can talk about it through text message and what's going on during the actual show. So that's kind of cool. Transition to audiobooks. So like having someone read to you, it would be like socializing.
Just hearing somebody else's voice sometimes, and like if you live alone, I think that would be more helpful, because you don't really get that auditory input. Cleaning
the house, like for real. Okay, that sounds good. Keep exercising, which has been really difficult for me. I'm on the second floor. I was going to the gym, and I think I figured out that like I like the gym for the people that are there, not necessarily for the actual act of exercising. It's kind of like a byproduct of going, but that's okay. I think it's still a legitimate thing to know about yourself, and I've definitely decided I'm not going to take it for granted when I get to go back, and I'm going to be so completely obnoxious because I'm so excited to be back around people. And it's funny too, because even at work, I find myself I'm not a touchy person, but I want to talk to people, and it's harder when everyone's wearing masks and repeatedly putting sanitizer on their hands and things like that. So it's been a very interesting transition, and I feel like my daily life has changed quite a bit, but that's because I'm someone who goes to restaurants, and I like to talk to servers, and I like to talk to the people in the elevator, and I want to talk to the people, or even little tiny mini conversations leaving the gym. Oh, that was a good workout. You did a great job. That kind of stuff. You can't, those have been taken from me, and that's what's been so detrimental through all of this. And of course, in Wisconsin, the essential workers, some of them might not be so essential. Liquor stores are still open. And if you are someone who has ever lived in Wisconsin, Teegan, you know how important liquor stores are to Wisconsinites. I feel like they have to stay open simply so that people stay in their relationships and still, I don't know, have something to do at night. And that's kind of sad though too. When you think about it, you wouldn't want to be someone who needs that in order to survive or socially interact, but it's so much a part of Wisconsinite culture. You You go to a campfire, you bring a box of beer, and that's just how it is.
Yeah.
So whether people are doing, a couple people at home or just going home with their spouse and chilling out at home, then I guess that's part of it. Like I understand that concept. So nonetheless, I wanted to give words of encouragement for all of my extroverts out there, and Teegan can give her words of encouragement for introverts.
Yes.
I think I did see that there are a couple of things that introverts can do to help cope with it, more making sure that you still have your me time, because if people are at home, your children are at home interrupting your quiet and something like that, then that might be probably the hardest part to
pretty much
consider. Yeah, especially if you were someone who is used to being out and about to go to work, and then you have to suddenly work from home. There's also that possibility of having to change things up and make sure you keep your work routine, but still get up, get dressed, and still, I don't know, interrupt your time by going to the kitchen or, not quarantining yourself to a small space, but still understanding that your house is your house and your home is your home and that kind of thing. So I'm rambling now. Geek on Fleek is my baby, and I really wanted to talk about extroverts and introverts. And now we're going to talk about sidekicks, but not the kind that are on bicycles, right?
Nope. Or the little fancy schmancy 2000s era pre-mobile texting thing. Do you remember that?
No, I don't. Are you showing your age right now?
Yes, I am showing my age right now. It was before phones were all super texty and stuff, you could send all messages and stuff using a sidekick. I remember Paris Hilton had I think one of the first ones, and it was just the thing to have,
Okay. I feel once I saw one, I'd be like, oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah, you probably would. Yeah. It was here and gone very, very quickly.
Instantaneous.
So. One of those things that was very quickly obsolete.
Right. Okay, so this is a topic that we actually had in the hopper for a while. And I'm a little worried because I don't know anything about the formula or what makes a good sidekick. And most of the time I feel like people who are heroes nowadays would have partners, entourages. Even when you think of, Doctor
teams.
Who and having a companion. This new Doctor seems to be having an entourage. The first couple of episodes I've watched, she's got 3 other people with her. So what makes a good sidekick?
Well, I mean, when you say something like sidekick, especially in the context of superheroes, I think probably most people are going to go to Batman and Robin, because he's probably one of the more iconic sidekick superheroes. He's been around for so long, and even though there's been a lot of different iterations, there's been a lot of different people who have taken up the mantle of Robin specifically, he's well known, or she's well known, because there have actually been a couple of girl characters who have taken on the mantle of Robin. But your mind just kind of goes there. That's just, at least for me, it does. It just automatically makes that association. And one of the things, no matter which Robin you're talking about, I think one of the most important things is that Robin has to contribute to whatever it is that Batman is doing. And he has to, offer up his own input and also not get in the way. I think that's one of the most important things, is to not hinder the hero as much as they help them. And I think, some of the, sidekicks in general who are kind of, looked down on and despised, they kind of get that feeling that they're more trouble than they're worth. For whatever help that they offer, they just don't offer that much in return, and they end up, just being way more trouble. Either they're getting kidnapped all the time, or just, messing up what the hero is doing and just making a general mess of things. So I think that's kind of an important formula to keep in mind, is that they're not only helpful, but they don't hinder as well.
Right. And then, I mean, would you want them to, I still don't, let me be honest. Mm-hmm. Every time we talk about people who take up mantles of things, to use your wording, I don't understand it. Why don't they have their own name? Why don't they have their own identity? What's the benefit of taking up the mantle of Robin versus, deciding you're a cardinal or mourning dove? I don't know.
It's a consistency thing, so that criminals on the street, when there's it's not just Batman and whoever that is, it's Batman and Robin. It's so, even though it may be a different Robin, it's still Robin, and you can recognize their outfit, you can recognize their style, and you can know who that is instantly and who they're associated with. So it's kind of just, I think, for consistency's sake, whether Robin happens to be Dick Grayson or Jason Todd or Tim Drake or Stephanie Brown or Carrie Kelly or Damian Wayne, you can immediately pick out, yeah, that's Robin. And if Robin's here, then Batman's probably not too far behind.
Okay. All right. So having the same goals and plans as your hero, that would be number 1, right?
Yes.
What's number 2?
Number 2, like I said, is helping them. And it's not just in the general sense, just providing moral support in something, they actually offering them some sort of, significant support. Tim Drake especially was very much a detective. He was one of the Robins that actually figured out Batman's secret identity, and that's how he kind of became the next Robin, is he actually figured out that Batman was Bruce Wayne. So, I mean, he definitely, brings that kind of aspect to the table, whereas Jason Todd was a bit more acrobatics and actual, physical backup, where he could be there and he could be right in the middle of the fray and he could take on pretty much whoever Batman was taking on.
Sure. So it's just like when you're playing a video game with a friend of yours or your significant other or something, and they don't know what they're doing, so they sort of run around and get lost and then need you to help them, that kind of thing. Yes. And that brings us definitely, I think, into the third point, which is that they can't hinder more than they help. Ah, yes. Because, I mean, if they're more trouble than they're worth, then it's why are they there then? I think that's especially true in a lot of video games, especially if you pick, just say the words escort mission. I think most gamers are just going to roll their eyes and groan, because escort missions are the worst things ever. They're usually with NPCs whose AI is just really, really stupid, that wants to run into danger and not, make themselves less of a target. I have literally only run one set of escort missions that I enjoyed, and it was to escort a giant metal robot that shot lasers and mini nukes. So it wasn't really an escort mission. It was more of just walk beside this robot and, yeah, good luck. and try not to get in the way as it shoots its mini nukes. That was pretty much the escort mission. But yeah, other than that, escort missions are just so notorious for being a huge headache. And I mean, whether it's Resident Evil, I think there's a 300 video game where you had a certain point where you had to do an escort, and it's just such a pain every time. But there is a positive sometimes. Sometimes you do occasionally get partners in video games, whether it's somebody physical there playing with you, or actually somebody in the game that is helpful. And if anybody noticed the graphic for the teaser graphic for this week's
for this week's episode, you'll see that I actually used one of my own screenshots from God of War, the most recent God of War, where you're controlling Kratos, but you also have Atreus. And at first I was really worried when I was going to play, because I was like, okay, is Atreus going to be more of a hindrance? Do I have to really watch him and make sure that he's okay? And I mean, really, Atreus takes care of himself, and he can really bring it too. So, I mean, he's actually a huge, huge help when I'm, especially fighting like the big trolls and all these big bosses and everything. I can really like utilize him and use strategy and with his special abilities along with, Kratos's typical slash and trash.
But he's still a non-player character.
Yes, he is a non-player character. So it's not like you could switch over and play as Atreus. You're still just playing as Kratos. So he is strictly an NPC. So, I mean, great job with his AI, honestly.
Okay. So, how do you strategize with a non-player character?
I'm using Atreus specifically just because we've been talking about him.
No, go ahead.
But I can actually get into other games as well. But for God of War, specifically, Atreus uses arrows, and he starts off with 3. You can upgrade him to 4 at a time, and so you shoot off 3 or 4, and then it has to refill, which it actually refills fairly quickly. And he can also get these special runes. So he has these special attacks that he can use as well, either sending out a pack of wolves to attack whatever enemies you're facing. He can have an elk that discharges lightning to damage your enemies. There's, I think, a hawk that also, does something kind of similar, like swooping down and, targeting different enemies that you're fighting. There's actually one in particular I love. It's not necessarily a combat one, but it's called the Bitter Squirrel, and he can be summoned, and the Bitter Squirrel will go and he'll find these little health and rage potions. So if you're low on health or if you're low on your rage meter, you can go and use him, and then he'll just pop up, give him to you, and you can pop him and be on your way. It's really, really neat to kind of time some arrow attacks from Atreus and then go and stun an enemy and then go in and grab them or, throw an axe at them and, just kind of combo out the move from there. So that's kind of how I utilize the strategy. I don't know if other players do things a little bit differently, but that's just how I kind of personally work around the AI.
Okay. What else does a good sidekick have to have?
I think, obviously, they need a really good compatibility with the hero character. Big one, I think, to bring up is Gabrielle and Xena, the infamous lesbian couple from the 90s that everybody just loved.
Warrior princess.
Yes. I mean, their chemistry was just amazing. And I mean, obviously they didn't come out and explicitly say, yeah, they're together, but the subtext is there. The writers and the actresses have all said that, yeah, they're a thing. So it's, just really awesome to see that kind of chemistry, come into the background and play into everything that they do and everything that, every action that they take, every interaction that they have with each other. You can just see how well that they get along. And I mean, I think that's true of a lot of, really good, kind of hero sidekick, setups where they're either really good friends or they just work really, really well together.
Right. Well, and I feel like they almost have to complement each other as well. Like they have to not so much working well together, but also look good together.
Yeah, exactly. Have a certain aesthetic.
I feel like, yeah, the few times where there have been, bad pairings or odd pairings, it's known that it's an odd pairing. It's definitely obvious that it's odd, to say the least.
Yeah, it's like you can see it, almost from a mile away. You might not even always be able to put your finger on it, but you can tell that there's something off here, Yeah,
and there have been times too where that's part of the plot. That's part of the lead up to a separation or a rejection of each other. Even when it comes down to the Incredibles and Incrediboy. I mean,
yeah.
you know, it's like when it's not complimentary, it's almost setting up the story.
Mm-hmm. Or sometimes I think it can be used to set up their development of their relationship so that they become closer. I know this is all non-canon now, but one of my favorite book series, and Star Wars wise, was the book series that kind of detailed Obi-Wan's and Qui-Gon's, you know, master Padawan relationship and how they kind of came together. And like in the beginning, like Qui-Gon really was not interested in having another apprentice. Obi-Wan was bound for, you know, some sort of, I can't remember what exactly they call it at the top of my head. ADHD is not kind. But like basically, you know, he was not going to be a Jedi Knight. He was going to go into some other kind of service instead for the Jedi Order. And, you know, so when Qui-Gon actually did come in and they decided that, yeah, I guess I'll be your master. Like at first they didn't really seem to mesh very well, and they kind of went through a couple of, you know, trials together. But, you know, after that they kind of grew together as characters and they actually bonded even closer. So, you know, I think it kind of can depend on which way the story's going. A conflict can either, you know, signal a separation, or it can signal a further character development down the line to where the hero and the sidekick are going to be drawn even closer together.
Yeah, I mean, there have been times where, you know, the major conflict with them has always been, you know, part of what draws them closer together too. I feel like the same kind of thing happens in the background of Clone Wars too, or I've been told that happens with Anakin and Obi-Wan too, where part of the development of them, and Jedis aren't sidekicks. Let's stop.
Well, and I think part of that is because at that point, Anakin is moving from his Padawan role into his knight and master role. And so it's kind of a changing of Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationship as well. It's, you know, not just the master Padawan sidekick hero thing coming to an end. You know, they're now equals. And so it's kind of, you know, when you're used to a relationship being one way and then that relationship changes, it can be an adjustment for everybody, even if it's for the better.
To the changing of the guard. I feel like there was also some kind of rendition of Batman and Robin where Robin had a moment where he wanted to sort of branch off or do something differently, but I couldn't tell you what rendition or show, movie, whatever that was. I might have made it up in my head. Who knows?
Well, and I mean, most of the people who have been Robin usually move on to other roles. I mean, Dick Grayson, when he ages up, he becomes Nightwing. Jason Todd obviously becomes the Red Hood. Tim Drake becomes Red Robin. Yum. And, you know, I have to throw that in there.
I know.
And then I believe Stephanie Brown became Batgirl, if I'm remembering correctly, or at least she was at one point in time, because by that point, Barbara Gordon was Oracle because of, you know, paralyzed and obviously can't go doing, you know, chasing criminals in the street anymore. So yeah, I mean, like a lot of times they will kind of move on from that role, and even though they'll still be a part of the Bat family in general, they're a different facet of that Bat family. And you know, especially I think the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson have really, you know, goes through a bunch of different changes. I think probably because he is the oldest and, you know, he's known Bruce the longest, he kind of just, you know, he goes through this phase obviously where he's just kind of over Bruce, but he still wants to do the superhero thing. And they kind of do at least usually come back towards at least a mutual understanding of each other. So it's, you know, again, it's just like an evolution of their relationship. Instead of being, you know, the gopher and the person that, you know, is just, you know, you go here, you do this, you know, instead of the ones taking commands, he's like, I'm doing my own thing, so you got to get used to that, you know?
Right. So what is Gaming Corner for this week?
So Gaming Corner, I mean, really when you talk about sidekicks or companions in general, I mean, BioWare really has some of the best. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here, you know? And I mean, really my favorite BioWare game that I could probably play over and over and over and over again is Dragon Age 2. I mean, I know some people don't like it, and I get why, but I live for that chaotic disaster buy energy, so it's kind of my favorite. And I think one of its strong points is definitely the characters that inhabit Dragon Age 2 and the way that their relationships all kind of evolve. Because, I mean, looking at them, they just seem like this motley crew that absolutely should not get along whatsoever. And yet, even as the years progress, because, I mean, Dragon Age 2 takes place over a 10-year period of time, in those 10 years... you would think that, you know, even if they come together for missions, that they would just kind of drift apart and do their own thing. But no, they stay together as a sort of friend, almost as a familial unit. You know, they go to the tavern together, they play card games together, they do other activities outside of that together. They're, despite all of their differences, it's like they've just decided, okay, yes, you are part of my family. You know, even if it seems like it shouldn't be a match, it is. And it really works in that context, in that period of time. So, I mean, really hats off to the writers at BioWare, because, I mean, I know that they were really stretched over, the 14-month development period from beginning to end that they had to pour into that. And I mean, obviously a lot of things had to kind of get shunted by the wayside and cut and redone, but you can really tell where they invested their time and energy, and that was definitely with the companions. And I mean, you get a really nice variety. I mean, you get a former slave who is trying to kind of figure himself out and find his identity outside of his life as a slave. You have a pirate who no longer has her ship, and she's just kind of sailing through life and kind of denying that she's trying to find meaning. But I think Isabella secretly is trying to find meaning. You have this little blood mage who is just so naive and innocent, and yet is getting wrapped up in things that are way too big and that she should not get wrapped up in. You have this lovely dwarven rogue who is a writer and practically a poet, and yet is also deadly with a crossbow and just so compelling. And I mean, just really all of them have their own little shtick that draws you to them, and it just doesn't let you go. No matter how many times I play the game, I play them just to talk to the characters and just to run around and listen to them interact with each other. I mean, one of my favorite lines is when Fenris teases Varric about not having a beard, and don't all dwarves have beards? and he says, oh, well, I thought your beard fell onto your chest, noting that Varric has a very hairy chest. And it's funny to see them all kind of grow comfortable around each other and support each other, even if from the outside it seems completely random. So that's my little gaming corner, not rant, I guess, just sort of
right.
Positive reinforcement for the BioWare writers. Please do more of this. I want more of this in the next Dragon Age game. Not that
Awesome.
Inquisition wasn't good, but I don't know. There's just something about Dragon Age 2 I just absolutely love, and I want more of it, y'all. Come on.
Anything else to say about Sidekicks?
I think we've pretty much covered everything that I could think of. Shout out to Emily for putting this down in the big episode idea document so that we could come back to it later and pick it and talk about it.
And finally bring it to fruition.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Teegan, and thanks for getting nerdy with us on Beauties and Headcanons.